Hey guys, so we're just about there. We are almost to 1,000 subs, and in honor of that, I asked you guys on Discord what it is you'd like to see me work on next. And a couple of y'all wanted to know about me. You wanted to know about the life of Raven Knight. Who am I? Well, I don't want to do a face reveal yet, but I will tell you a little bit about me so that you can know me a bit better. I won't make this a super long video, but I figured if y'all are really that interested, I can tell you about me. So here we go. I was born and raised in South Carolina in the United States to mother, father, and I have one little brother. My childhood was decent but rough. There were moments in my life growing up that were not always pretty, and it pushed me to start training in martial arts. I began learning karate when I was really young, and then progressed into stuff like taekwondo and judo. And as I got older, I branched out into more martial arts so that by the time I was in college, I was participating competitively in Muay Thai and mixed martial arts, and also training in swordsmanship, HEMA and Kendo, to be specific. Went on into middle school and was baptized as a Christian at a very young age. A lot of people have asked me what's my faith. I'm a Baptist Christian. And after I went through my walk with Christ for a while, I didn't quite understand it until my early high school days when I began attending a camp up in the mountains of South Carolina, which I fell in love with, called Camp McCall. This mountain camp really opened my eyes to God, opened my eyes to spirituality, opened my eyes to morality. I fell in love with the mountains. I fell in love with hiking. I fell in love with the outdoors. And that was where I really found God. I felt God really speak to me there, and I felt my calling there. And so, honestly, if I could have my own house, if I could have my own cabin or house, it would be a nice cabin or cottage at the top of a mountain somewhere. I could live my entire life in a mountain cabin. I just love the mountains. I could never get tired of it. I just see God's work everywhere when I stand in the mountains. It is my goal to go back to that camp and just sit on top of Chapel Hill and just look out at everything. It is really, really gorgeous. But one thing I learned from my time and my connection to God was something that I was called to do. And I never understood it, but when I was a kid, like I said in a previous video, I always wanted to help other people. I felt this urge to be helpful. I was always happiest when I felt wanted, when I felt desired, when people said, "Hey, glad you could help me out." And that's when God kind of revealed it to me. God had given me a warrior's heart, but also a servant's heart. You know, I wanted to be the kind of person who could always be there, the kind of person who was useful. I always found that I flourished in an environment where I could be of use, in an environment where I could enrich other people's lives. So that was where God really showed that to me. So I first started looking into being a teacher because I thought if I could be an educator, then that would be a great way for me to serve other people. So out of high school, the first thing I did was I went to, I should say this, while I was in high school, I went into the ROTC where I learned discipline, respect, honor. I learned military history in ROTC, which was awesome. That was where I got my start in learning about military history and how it worked, and like American military history specifically, which was really cool. But then when I went to college, I went to Anderson University, where I started with an elementary education major. I wanted to teach in elementary schools because my mom worked at an elementary school, and I thought that would be a good place to flourish. But it was not to be because Anderson University greatly discriminated against me. It was a very difficult place for me to live and work because I was the only male there going in for an elementary education degree. The rest were all female. And apparently there was this belief that if you're a male trying to become an elementary school teacher, you must secretly be a pedophile or pervert. Entirely untrue, but because of that, a lot of people were not happy to see me in the role, and I was encouraged many times to find other lines of work. It was very difficult, and I felt very lost and confused, and I had no motivation to keep going. However, there were some good things about being at Anderson. For one thing, Anderson University was very close to the camp that I mentioned earlier, so I was very close to the mountains. But secondly, I met my first girlfriend there from Korea. She was a wonderful girl. I enjoyed my time with her, but, when I left Anderson and she went back to Korea, things just happened. We eventually grew apart, and that's something I greatly regret even to this day. But the other good thing about Anderson was it was also where I got my start in competitive martial arts. I started competing in Muay Thai, which was where I really flourished in combat, and I also began learning HEMA and Kendo up there as well. So I was starting to grow as a warrior, as a fighter, which helped me understand better how to fight and write about fighting, because at that point in time, when I went to Anderson, that's when I started writing stories. I wanted to be a novelist as well. I wanted to tell stories to people. I wanted to share my imagination with people. You can find my DeviantArt account, and I'll leave links in the description, to some of my earliest works, some of the stuff that I started writing at Anderson and continued writing even afterwards. And you can see how bad I am as a writer. I am a terrible writer. A lot of it is very juvenile, very silly, some of it very young adult, but it's where I got started. So if y'all want to know, hey man, how did you come up with this story about For Honor meets Warhammer 40K? It all started as a writer at Anderson University, which was still very fun. After I left Anderson, I went on to Midlands Technical College, where I got my associate's degree. And then, ironically, for someone who loves the mountains, I went to Coastal Carolina University, a college close to Myrtle Beach. And some of y'all may know about Coastal Carolina. They've been on ESPN quite frequently as an up-and-coming big football team. They're currently undefeated, as far as I know, which makes me very proud of my Chanticleers. But Coastal Carolina was a turning point. The first thing I did when I got into Coastal Carolina was I changed my major. I was no longer going to be an elementary education major. I was going into interdisciplinary studies, which meant that I was kind of creating my own major. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. All I knew was that I wanted to make a difference in other people's lives and find a way to share my strength, my knowledge, my skills. I wanted a path that would allow me to be useful. I just didn't know what that was. I became a residential advisor, which means that I was in charge of a small dormitory area, and I basically made sure that everyone was living comfortably and well. I helped maintain discipline, and my time at ROTC and martial arts helped teach me how to do that better. My brother was also at the college with me, so we ended up living together after my time as a residential advisor, and we lived together in a condo not far off campus, which was really helpful. My brother was a history major, and he started teaching me a lot about history. I started going to some history classes, and that was where I got really started into my love of history. I began studying medieval history, and then when I met another girlfriend that I had over there, and I should say, my love life is really crappy. After my girlfriend in Anderson, I had two other girlfriends, local girls. One was insane, I won't go into her, but the other one cheated on me, blatantly. She let me know that she cheated on me. Wasn't even remorseful about it. I was very, very upset about that. And then I met a girl from Japan who I dated for a little while. Sweet girl, very nice girl. And she's the one who really got me interested in stuff like anime and stuff like Japan, Asian culture. So I changed my degree one more time. I was still going for my interdisciplinary studies, but I also added an Asian studies minor to it. And I began taking a lot of Asian history and culture classes, which were a great eye-opening experience for me. While this was going on, I also wanted to increase my writing ability. So I began taking some English classes. And one of them I took under a man named Dr. Stephen Hamelman, who opened my eyes to the world of literature in a way no other teacher ever had. He encouraged me to pursue great things, and I have done that ever since. Great man. I admire him even now. So if you're watching this, Dr. Hamelman, know that you were a huge inspiration for me. While I was at Coastal, I also got my first job as a waiter at Olive Garden near Myrtle Beach, and that was a good way to make some money while I was down there. Coastal was probably my biggest adulthood experience. It was where I went from being a boy to a young man to a man, and that's how it went. Got my first job as an English teacher at a high school in South Carolina in the Midlands. I won't say the school name because y'all know that it wasn't a good experience. I wanted to help people. I wanted to be a servant and a warrior. I wanted to be someone that people could rely on. And I was met with so much disrespect, so much corruption, and so much disinterest in what I had to offer. It literally drove me to depression, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. Yes, I was actually diagnosed with PTSD not long after that experience. I was in a very dark place. I contemplated suicide for a while. Not just because I dealt with disrespectful students in a difficult circumstance, but because I had no idea what I was doing. I wanted to serve, but I had no idea where I could go. I had spent so many years of my life dedicated to learning the art of education, only to find that education was not working. I had dedicated myself to martial arts and to combat, but had nowhere to practice anymore. There were the man who taught me martial arts had passed away. The gym had closed, and there were no new ones opening in the area that did what I did. I actually had a experience where after I left that gym where I learned Muay Thai, I went to another gym, a karate dojo, and I hadn't done karate in years, so I didn't remember any of the techniques. And he immediately pits me against a black belt, and I warned the dude, please don't go all out on me because I'm not going to hold back either. And I have been fighting in the octagon for a while, and he goes, no, man, it's cool. He goes all out, I go all out on him, and I break his arm. Like, I didn't want to, but I realized that if people weren't going to help start me from the bottom up, I was going to hurt somebody. And so I was incredibly lost. I had nowhere to de-stress. I had no one to talk to. I was living in an apartment, but the apartment complex was terrible. Had bed bugs in the apartment, lots of drug dealing neighbors, and a couple of break-ins in local apartments. I hated it. I went to another school to teach. It was no better. Similar problems. And I started to question my ability to teach, my ability to be a creator, my ability to do anything of worth. I started questioning my own value. Because I often associated my value with the way other people saw me. If people saw me as a help, if people saw me as a friend, if people saw me as something useful, then I was satisfied. I know that sounds really petty, but it's true. I saw myself as a sword. Something that people could rely on to help them. I was a tool. I was something that you could use and make the most of and be glad to have. But the downside to that was that meant that people often did just use me and then put me aside, and I felt isolated. So that didn't help my depression. It hurt. And after the bedbug incident at my apartment, I ended up moving out and I moved back in with my parents until we can get an apartment situation set up. I quit teaching and went on to start management training at a local restaurant that I'd known about since childhood. My dream, like I said, is to return to the mountains, return to God, to find my place. And if that's to be a manager at a restaurant, a chef at a restaurant, I'll take it. If it's to eventually go overseas and be an English teacher in Japan, which is an honest to God option that I've debated, I'll do it. In fact, I'm set up to go on a mission trip to Japan next year in August so that I can bring the word of God there, which again would help me find direction. I've slowly started to overcome my depression because I've started to find new outlets and new things to help give me purpose. But for a while I had none, and it scared me. It scared my family because they had no idea I was depressed. I kept it hidden pretty well, I think. As for this channel, For Honor was always a game that I loved, because it combined things that I loved. It combined video games, which I love, but it also combined Medieval Warriors, and it combined a combat mechanic that I adored. I loved the game. Loved it. I got it when I was at Coastal, and I loved it ever since. But then when I saw all these comments and videos all saying how bad the game was, how it was dead, how it was terrible, it started making me think, why am I even playing this game? I don't know why. And that just added to my depression, because remember, at the time, I was depressed. I had no sense of worth, and I found worth in a game, but this game, people were saying was crappy. So again, my worth was being called into doubt. And something my dad always used to tell me was, you can walk through your life miserable, or you can do something about it. Sometimes your mood, your attitude is the choice you make. And I made a choice, and I said, I'm not going to walk through my entire life miserable. And if everyone's going to be miserable about this game, then I'm going to be the one voice who starts saying positive things. And you can say, oh, well, you're just being a simp to Ubisoft. You're just kissing up to Ubisoft. You're just going against the norm. This is all for clout. Yeah, well, call it what you want. I call it being positive. Because that's what's kept me going. Because y'all have proven to me that at least 1,000 people believe that what I have to say is worth something. At least 1,000 people believe that my videos mean something, and y'all are excited to see them. That means that there are at least 1,000 people who can at least acknowledge that there's something good about this game and can enjoy it. I'm so glad to have the following that I do. I've come a long way from that dorky little kid on the playground who walked around doing karate kicks to practice. I've come a long way from that high school boy in an ROTC uniform leading a small company of cadets younger than him. I've come a long way from the boy in college who was nervous for his first date and trying to practice some Korean phrases. I've come a long way from the guy who walked into the octagon for the first time, hands trembling, because I had not been in an official match yet. I've come a long way from the waiter at Olive Garden who was unsure how to take an order. I've come a long way from that teacher in a classroom of disrespectful students who didn't want to be taught and yet was trying his hardest to teach them anyway. I've come a long way from all that. I look back on my past and I think it happened, and I've learned a lot from it. But what matters is what I take from the past to influence my future, and that is the beauty of learning history, which is part of why I made this history channel in the first place. Because that's what history is. We learn from it to better ourselves. So, if there's any more details about me that you want to know, I'd be happy to share them in another video or in the comments section or in a live stream. But I think that's a pretty decent introduction to the Raven Knight. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a little something about me. Thank you all for almost getting me to my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Here's to another 1,000 in the future, maybe more. I don't know if I deserve it, but there it is. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.